Hello. Welcome. It is September 13th, 2025. I'm Miss Faith, and I am doing what it is that I do. I am at the Windsor, Connecticut Town Green, and I'm at the far side of it, actually, where the memorial is. I'll show you a little bit. There's a lot of names. I guess people can buy stones in memory of people, or somewhere here we have the first person who was put to death on the charge of witchcraft in Colonial America. The second woman, the first was Alice Young, and the second was Lydia Gilbert. We'll be talking about them. I honestly am a bit turned around, so I'm not sure where they are, but I do have pictures of their stones. But I want to tell you this story first, so I hope you can see me with the bright light, and I'm glad I'm at this end because there's a huge town-wide tag sale going on the other end, which is so great. I love those. Those are so much fun. So I'm going to sit, if you don't mind. I hope you can see me. It's very bright out here, but it's such a beautiful day. I'm going to bring you a little bit closer because there's some traffic. I want you to be able to hear. There we go. So we're here in Windsor, Connecticut, and I know everybody this time of year, when you think about the witch trials, Halloween, of course, is coming up, and we're so unfortunately dovetailed into that, which is Halloween. It's one of our holidays, but that's another story for another time. The witch trials, though, didn't happen around Halloween. Very few, if any of them, happened around Halloween, and there was a reason for that. Usually the accusations started in the spring and continued through the summer. How it all began, and the first person that was put to death, Alice Young, I've got my notes here, was in 1647. She lived here in Windsor, Connecticut. I believe she was a single woman. I believe she lived with her father, and certain people were targeted when the witch trials happened. They were rampant throughout Europe. It was anyone that was non-conforming, single women. Oh, they were bad. You were a single woman, wow. Keep in mind, single women in this country didn't get the right to, have their own credit cards, take out a loan, rent a hotel room until, I think, somewhere in the 1950s, 60s, without a man's signature. So we're going back 378 years ago. 1647. Alice Young lived here, and we're not really sure what happened. There's just a simple line in a diary of a town clerk that said Alice Young or someone was hung here today um, the Hartford State House. It was the new State House. And then someone else in a diary actually wrote Alice Young was executed. But it was typical to have a situation where, okay, you couldn't go to a supermarket, you couldn't go to a store and just buy all your food. You had to be self-sustaining. You had to raise your meat. So you had a little pig. Perhaps you had a beef cow, or maybe you went in on one with a few neighbors. You raised all your vegetables in the garden, your potatoes, you raised your whatever, your cabbages. Cabbages were big. People loved the cabbages. A cabbage could sustain a family for a ridiculously long period of time. Turnips, a lot of root vegetables. These, brought from the old country and things that they found here. I don't even think potatoes were in their diet yet. And if a neighbor, say their pigs, were to have gotten out and decimated someone's garden, I know one time, I grew up on a farm, and one time I woke up in the morning, my mother was screaming, understandably upset, because my father, I'm not sure exactly what the story was, but he was a farmer. We had all kinds of animals on a very large farm, and somehow a bunch of pigs that had been corralled off somehow escaped their confines and decided to dig up my mother's entire front lawn. Their snouts, they're like a rototiller. I guess they're looking for grubs or little bugs or something under the grass. And yeah, because she had all of us kids. We had to put the grass back. It took us like all day, if not longer. So they're very, very damaging animals, or there's so many different things that could happen with your neighbors. That's my point. I had actually heard of that story with another person being accused in New England. But that type of ill will, one neighbor having a problem with another neighbor, that like never happens, right? Having a problem with a neighbor. Well, back then, if that were the case, the way the court system was set up is all your neighbor would have to do is go to the sheriff and say, my neighbor just had an argument with me, yelled at me. That was last week, and then I was so sick. I got, I don't know, something, the flu, whatever was going around at the time, and I was so sick. Or my cow went dry. Or my milk went sour. We don't have refrigeration. It could be, again, the accusations started in the spring and summer, where things are a lot warmer, and your milk went sour. Oh my God, how unheard of. So it must be my neighbor's fault. And since she yelled at me and all of these bad things happened, she must be a witch. Doesn't even sound like a good movie because it's so ridiculous. Maybe that's why movies about witches today have to involve so much fantastical, unbelievable, supernatural, concepts. Because the true story is so utterly ridiculous that anyone that was sane with any common sense would be just like, are you kidding me? Well, the person would go to the sheriff, tell them the story, and Alice Young was promptly arrested and hung. May 5th. That's Lydia Gilbert. 1647 in Hartford at the old State House. And that's all it took. It was called spectral evidence. Spectral evidence, you could just have a dream about someone. I mean, we all dream pretty much. Or you could just, you can't prove a dream, you could just say to the sheriff, I had a dream about my neighbor, and she put a curse on me. She flew in my window. All the fairy tales or concepts, you know, the legends and lore of the time. They believe witches flew around like birds and consorted with the devil and flew around on broomsticks and all these kind of ridiculous concepts. So by just saying you had a dream and you saw your neighbor doing that would be enough to have you arrested. So after Alice Young was arrested and put to death, well, let's look. Executed in New England. First, Alice Young, or her name was Alice Young, an old English version of Alice. She was the first, hung at the State House in Hartford, Connecticut in 1647. Then Mary Johnson was hung in 1648. Now, witch burnings happened in Europe. We never had anyone burned in this country under the color of authority, which means the law, the legal authority law of the day. You know, if somebody did anything vigilante-wise, it was probably not reported, because a lot of the actual, you know, legal sheriff and, you know, courtroom and judge and jury and all that kind of stuff and execution, a lot of those weren't really reported. That's what, you know, the Salem one in 1692, there's two reasons it is as famous today as it is. They kind of went a little overboard in one summer with 20 deaths. That is a mass execution. 20. Throughout, I mean, Connecticut had 11, but over the course of 20 years, but Salem is just boom, one summer in a matter of 3 months, 20 people. So just the number, and two, the other reason that Salem is so, you know, predominant when we talk about the witch trials is because they kept exceptional records for their day. And one of the only examples of, you know, oh no, the records were lost due to a fire in the town hall, a flood in the town hall, you know, a hurricane at the town hall. That ridiculous story, I mean, it's like an American myth, but it's happened all around this country, where records of the past have just disappeared because of some kind of calamity at the town hall, which is really sad. I've encountered that so many times in my research, doing various things, studying history. But Salem has exceptional records. I mean, just the book of the trials is this thick, and it goes from before until afterwards. So those two reasons keep Salem at the forefront when you think about witch trials in New England. But Alice was the first one in Hartford, and she came from Windsor. Then Mary Johnson, Margaret Jones, Alice Lake, and then, you know, Mrs. Kendall. Now she was Margaret Jones, Alice Lake, Mrs. Kendall were in Massachusetts. Then we have Joan and John Carrington, and it's important. You know, husbands and wives were put to death also. Now, Let me see if I have some of the reasons why. Let me see. Yeah. Many times people were accused, not in Connecticut so much because of land. That was very common in the Salem trials. We saw that a lot of land was seized. But let's see here. And that is important. Witchcraft was listed as a capital crime. Lydia Gilbert was the second one. She was accused of entertaining Satan, and that she somehow caused the death of a man called Henry Stiles. Now, there were 6 jurors who were residents of Windsor and knew that a Thomas Allen had been convicted of killing Mr. Henry Stiles. But still, Lydia was charged, and they believed she had used her abilities as a witch to cause Thomas Allen, when he was marching along with a militiaman, he dropped his musket and it discharged accidentally, killing Mr. Stiles. It was an accident, but they thought, oh no, yeah. So he was convicted of killing him, but it was accidental for him, so he never did any time, but she was hung because somehow she used her witchcraft to cause his musket to fall, discharge, and kill the guy in front of him. Are you kidding me? This is how people were accused and put to death. Now, Mary Johnson of Wethersfield was hung in 1650. She was accused of theft. So, she was brought before a magistrate, whipped. During her torture, she confessed to adultery, the murder of a child, and she said the devil did her chores. This is as she's being whipped. She was not charged with murder or adultery, but with entertaining Satan and sentenced to death. She was convicted in 1648, and they gave her a stay of execution because she was pregnant until 1650. Then she was executed. Her infant was given to the jail keeper, who had been paid £15 to keep and educate him. And then he worked as an indentured servant until the age of 21. Well, I wanted to talk to you more about the Bill of Rights and how we did not have it back in the 17th century, the 1600s. There were 11 people all told that were executed in Connecticut for the charge of witchcraft. And there were 20 in Massachusetts. Oh, there's a train going by. That's kind of cool. I love stay focused. The thing is, many of these were just simply, if anything, if they even saw the inside of a courtroom today, they would be in civil court. Most of them would be thrown out or mediated before they, got too far. They were just literally disputes. And that's awesome. And let's talk about some of the charges that would have been in play should our Bill of Rights have been around back in the 1600s. Bridget Bishop, she was one that was first hung in Salem, Massachusetts. Now, the first person accused in Salem was the slave Samuel Parrish, who was a minister. Her name was Tituba, and she came from West Indies. Now, the interesting thing about Tituba, magic, witchcraft was common to the land she came from. It was part of her culture at that time. And so when they asked her, the girls said you were doing witchcraft, and, during the winter time to entertain them, harmless. Crack an egg into a glass of water and try to look and see. It's like looking at clouds and trying to, oh wow, that one kind of looks like a bird, That's all it was. It was harmless. But when, the sheriff and the other people in town questioned her and said, "Are you a witch?" She said, "Yes." Maybe, I believe they were fairly new to the community because they had just replaced the old minister with Reverend Parrish. I believe that might have been his first year or the first year or two. So having come from the West Indies, it's quite understandable to think that she might not have been savvy to everything that had been going on in Europe as far as the witch trials. And there had only been, a few in Connecticut, and not many. So it wasn't like they had, CNN. So she might not have realized that by admitting she was, it could have been a very, very dangerous thing for her. Actually, by admitting she was, she probably saved her life because Tituba was never executed. I honestly believe, because they were still using the old Dominican monks, Malleus Maleficarum, witch's hammer, on how to identify, torture, out of confession, execute a witch. I don't think anywhere in it says anything, unless, I don't think it's been amended either. It doesn't say anything in that entire book on what to do when they, come right out, right from the get and say, yeah, I am. And so they were just like, put her back in jail and we'll get back to you. It was the ones that said, no, absolutely not. I'm not a witch. I am innocent. I go to church every Sunday. I'm a good, pious Puritan. That they were like, oh, okay, now we've got a formula. We've got a recipe to follow. Torture, Inquisition, all this, they look for witch marks, do all these horrible things to them, shave them, many times walk them into the courtroom naked. They were psychos, the Puritans, legit psychos. I'm actually surprised they haven't really popped up again. So Bridget Bishop, she would have come under the First Amendment if it was around today. Now, witchcraft itself would not have been covered at the time because it was not a religion as Wicca until 1952-53. So the First Amendment, as far as freedom of religion, was not a concept. But she was running a tavern, an ale house, hello, and she allowed people to play shuffleboard on the Sabbath. And so she was there, she wasn't in church, so freedom of religion would have come into play had they had the first 10 amendments, our Bill of Rights, because they expected everybody to be in church on Sunday, all day Sunday, and not be opening up their tavern and letting people play shuffleboard. So that would have come into play there. Sarah Good, now, she was a homeless single mom. So, you know, arresting her and, you know, pointing to her, the girls accused her because she's someone that was probably pointed out by the community because she was homeless and she would go door to door begging because she had a little girl, Dorcas. Dorcas was only like 3 or 4 years old, and when her mother was arrested, she was arrested for witchcraft too. And it was so tragic because they had to have the blacksmith make a special pair of shackles for little Dorcas's wrists and ankles because she was so little, to keep her shackled within the dungeon inside the jail. Now, they never did put Dorcas to death, but by the time the whole thing was over, sometime in 1693-94, and they released her from jail, she had gone clinically insane, and she was a ward of the state for the rest of her life. So it was pretty horrific. Then you have Rebecca Nurse. Now, Rebecca Nurse, she would have been protected by the due process, Fifth and Sixth Amendments with double jeopardy. Because when Rebecca Nurse, she was a very pious elderly woman, back then you had the Porters and the Putnams. And I'm not going to tell you which family she was from because she was from one of them, but like today it would have been the Republicans and the Democrats. And they really ruled, you know, the community. Whoever was in charge of the pulpit, you know, depending on the shift in the society, they ruled the community. And so I think she was out of favor at the time. And keep in mind, their government was ruled by the pulpit in the church. Their laws, the laws of 1650, were taken directly out of the Old Testament. So, even saying no to your parents over a certain age could get you stoned in the village square. It was really, really very extreme laws. Well, Rebecca Nurse, she was very pious. She was a church-going woman. She was accused of being a witch, and so they arrested her, and she went through the trial. She was acquitted. Everyone was like, no, we see her in church every single week. She brings things to the bake sale. I don't know, but she was a really nice lady. So they said, no, she's innocent, because they did have a jury. And the judges, they also had a panel of judges, like 3 or 4 judges. One judge said, you know what, we're not happy with your decision. Go back and come back with another decision. It's only 2 decisions. So they had to come back and say, okay, I guess she's guilty. You didn't like the other ones. So they said when she was being brought to Gallows Hill, to the hanging tree on the park, that as she went by the courthouse, that one of the stones fell off of the house, right into the street as she was going by. So people really felt that, you know, she was wrongly accused. So double jeopardy would definitely have protected her there. So as far as number 4, the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure without a warrant, they regularly would go into people's homes looking for anything that might be questionable. Now, Reverend George Burroughs, he actually, should have had his case brought to civil court because he had been the minister of Salem until Reverend Parrish came in. Then he retired and went up to Maine, but they still owed him money. And so he was talking to some attorney down in the Salem area about getting his money back, and then all of a sudden he was accused. And of course he didn't get his money. But they accused him and they found him guilty. And while he was standing at gallows, the hanging tree with the noose around his neck, his last words, he did the Lord's Prayer, and they believed, it was common knowledge, that a witch couldn't say the Lord's Prayer, properly. They would get it wrong, they'd make a mistake. He did it perfectly. And so people started to say, you can't hang him, he must be innocent. Well, Cotton Mather was there. Cotton Mather, he was Increase Mather's nephew, who now I think Cotton Mather graduated Harvard at the grand old age of 15. So he's very wise, very wise. And he said, no, hang him. And so they did. At this point, it had become such a spectacular event. Every weekend, the trials throughout that whole summer, the governor came from Boston. Every weekend, there was no Netflix, there was no TV, entertainment. This was entertainment, and they brought children not only to the trials but to the hangings because they felt that it built good moral character. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on here. So what Reverend George Burroughs, he would have been protected as far as, just bring your stuff to civil court. Then you have like John Proctor, who just simply spoke out and said, listen, this is crazy. These are a bunch of young girls who are, first, they believe they were affected by some type of food poisoning. It's often believed ergot food poisoning, which is a type of fungus that grows on rye. The conditions that summer, or the previous summer, had been very humid and wet. And we know by the diary accounts that the bread made from the flour the previous summer was red. So yeah, okay, well the flour's red this year, that's kind of nice, make the bread and eat it anyway. Well, ergot is natural LSD. Now LSD of a natural quantity baked into bread of a lower, it's probably not as strong with adults as it would be with children. Also, adults back then, everyone back then, if you weren't, basically feeding off the mother's milk, you were drinking mead or watered down ale or beer or something. Nobody drank the water. Fresh water from a stream is a fallacy. It never existed. I know, I grew up on a farm. You never know what died in that stream upriver, I'm telling you. It looks clean, it's not. So people always drink some type of alcoholic something because fermentation keeps it clean. It sterilizes it. So the adults are probably used to having a buzz. The little ones, though, with that ergot poisoning, they would be foaming at the mouth and hallucinating and seeing crazy things. And after it started to build up with the accusations and all these people, coming to the courthouse was packed. Then you had the governor and all these famous people coming, Cotton Mather. These were like the celebrities of the day. These girls became rock stars of their time. Everybody wanted to see them. They acted out dramatically in the courtroom, right on cue. Afterwards, within 20 years afterwards, many of them apologized and recanted, but people were already dead, and the damage was done. So with all of this, like with John Proctor, he just spoke out against the girls. You know, these are just silly little girls, and they put him to death. It continued until, well, Martha Corey was the last victim hung. That was an interesting case because everybody had been being tried and hung since early June of that year. And I always do this lecture in September because September 22nd was the last hanging of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in one day. And Martha Corey was the last victim hung. And fortunately, the first person was her husband that accused Martha. See, they were both married something like 60 years. That was ridiculously long, even then. And apparently they were very quarrelsome and didn't get along very well. So he was watching everything else happening in the little community. So he went to the sheriff and he's like, yeah, my wife, she's a witch. I saw her do things, so take her away. What he didn't know is that she got to jail and she turned around and said, yeah, so is he. So they came and got him. The thing is, where she said, no, I'm innocent like everybody else, he refused to plead. And when Giles Corey refused to plead, he knew the law. He had a lot of land. He was a wealthy farm owner. He had sons. He did not want to lose his property, and the law was such that as soon as you said innocent or guilty, the sheriff could take all of your property. So he refused to say anything. And they're like, well, we can't continue. We can't go on with the trial. You have to say something. He refused to, so they laid him down in the street. They put a huge board on him and started piling stones on him. Until at one time, the sheriff stood on top of him, and Giles's tongue was protruding out of his mouth. And the sheriff says, how do you plead, Giles Corey? And he rammed his cane, to stick his tongue back in his mouth. And Giles said, more weight. And so they put more weight on it until his ribcage crushed. But his sons, because of their father's, tenacity, kept their property. The sheriff wasn't able to seize it. And it's important to understand that the witch trials by this time had become a complete industry. Everyone from the beginning on received payment from the person that first took the complaint. The sheriff got paid. The person that went and got this accused witch got paid. The person making the shackles, the jailer, the person that had to bring them food if they got food in jail got paid. The person putting them on the cart, and then the person driving the cart to the courthouse got paid. The judges got paid. The person making the nooses got paid. Everyone got paid to digging the hole on the Gallows Hill, because they didn't get buried in the cemetery, because the cemeteries back then, they didn't have town cemeteries. They were all religious cemeteries, so they couldn't be buried there. Many of the bodies, like Rebecca Nurse's, because she came from a very wealthy family, and Giles Corey and Martha Corey and other ones, their families would go in the dead of night and take the bodies and bury them. Very much like the book of Tobit, if you've ever read that. To take care of the bodies properly and bury them on family ground. So, so it was a whole industry. And then finally, it all came to an end when a couple things happened simultaneously. Increase Mather, who was Cotton Mather's more elderly uncle, wise uncle. He was a man of his day, but he was also a forward thinker, very much like the Aristotle in this point. And he was looking at everything, and he's like, this is getting ridiculous. Okay, hundreds of people from Maine to New York were being accused. Hundreds, only 32 were executed, but hundreds were in jails all through New England. The only two states that actually executed anyone was Connecticut and Massachusetts. I see other states now around Halloween time, you know, doing these big witch trial things, but no one was executed, not with any evidence, except for Connecticut and Massachusetts. I can't imagine trying to take credit for that. That's kind of, it's bad enough that we have this. But the girls finally keep accusing and accusing and accusing, and finally, I guess they figured, let's really go, you know, all out, Netflix special. And they accused the governor's wife. I like to sit and imagine dinner that night. Okay, honey, that's it. Your weekend jaunts to Salem have just ended. No more. And it did. It ended immediately. So no more visits to Salem for him. And about the same time, Increase Mather came out. And he wrote a treatise that said a whole thing about the system of law they were practicing at the time, and using the spectral evidence of just, you know, someone has a dream and you can accuse someone and then they die several days later is just ridiculous. You need actual physical evidence. Let's move into the modern world. So we went from a court system, what was called Hoyer and Terminer, which means to hear and decide. Basically, I'm going to listen to you, and if I like what you have to say, okay, I'll put him to death. To a court of judicature, which means we need some justice. We need actual evidence. We need eyewitnesses. We need more to go on. We can't just, you know, feel our decision without anything. So we moved on to that, and he wrote a treatise that said, better it be that 10 witches go free than one innocent person be condemned to death. Now that has been paraphrased over history many times. I mean, I think actually Bailey said it. Many people have said it in their own phraseology, but Increase Mather was the very first one. And the last people that were, I was just looking at this last night, I was talking to my father about it, because I come from Colchester. I was born and raised in Colchester, Connecticut, and the last people that were accused were in Colchester, Connecticut. Here we go. Now, they were not put to death, because the last people put to death in colonial New England were in Salem in 1692 on September 22nd. And that was Martha Corey with 7 other people. And the last people accused, though, were in Colchester, Connecticut. In 1713, we had a Sarah Lowther and a Goody Brown. Goody was an old term for like an elderly missus. And then the last one was 1724, Sarah Spencer in Colchester. And we were getting a little bit, no actions were taken for the first 2, and the very last one, the court not only rejected that she was accused, but they fined her accuser. So things were starting to turn around. But we had accusations, Windsor, Wethersfield, Stratford, Fairfield, New Haven, East Hampton, Connecticut back then was actually what we call Long Island, New York today. Saybrook, Hartford had their own little Salem episode with, in 1 year, 10 people being accused and 3 executed. Farmington, Setauket, Stamford, Wallingford, and then Colchester. So a total of 50 people were accused in Connecticut because, like I said, Long Island at the time was part of Connecticut, which I thought was kind of interesting. So yeah, we had the Fairfield witch panics with 8 people at one time in 1692. So things got a little bit crazy around that time. So, but a total of 37 women were accused, only 13 men, because they felt that women were more likely to go wild and crazy and start hanging out with Satan, apparently. So, and in Salem there were hundreds, as well as 2 dogs executed in Salem. That was a common thing in Europe when they would go through certain villages, especially in Germany, during the witch panics in the 1500s. They would leave and no one would be alive. No chickens, no farm animals, no cats, no dogs. Everyone would be executed because obviously they must be in on it too. It got a little bit really crazy. So, and many husband and wife couples. So if, the wife was accused and the husband dared to stand up for her, he was usually taken down also. It was crazy. So today, Wicca is considered a religion in all 50 states. I'm an ordained minister, and we do weddings, and we call them hand fastings. We do baby namings, we call them wickenings. We do funerals, sadly, we call them requiem rites. We celebrate 8 Sabbats throughout the year, just like people celebrate, Christmas and Easter. And so we have 8 of them. They're agricultural holidays throughout the year. And the thing is, no one in colonial America that was put to death, except for maybe Samuel Wardwell, could have been called a witch. Samuel Wardwell was one of the people at the very last executions in Salem on September 22nd, and he happened to be a fortune teller by trade. I just have to ask, why, Samuel? You're living in a Puritan community and you're telling fortunes. So that was kind of a given. But other than him, everyone else. So when people say, well, they were doing witchy things like, growing herbs and, making potions in their kitchen. No, every single person was doing that. That's how people lived. Everybody was growing their herbs. That's what they ate, and that's what they used to season their food, and because we didn't have a supermarket. So, yeah, nobody, some of them were tavern keepers, a few of them, and again, ones that started to speak out. Those were the ones that they started to target toward the end. So, yeah. Any questions? Well, what we're going to do now is, I'm glad you guys showed up and everyone online. I do this every year. Last year I did it in Salem, but sadly, the last few years, I usually do it early in September. Now is the time to go to Salem if you have not gone before and you want to go. In the month of October, 31 days. A few years ago, they topped over 1 million. Now the Chamber of Commerce is saying closer to 2 million plus in 31 days, which is, I can't imagine. And I did because I love doing stuff like this, I'm crazy. I did the math one day that you can find this stuff out online, and the actual square acreage of Salem, and once you take out the acreage of the buildings, the actual roadways and the waterways, actual green or sidewalks where you could stand is only 6 square acres. And for that many people in 31 days, it's like, I just can't imagine. So, and I know last year, and I believe the year before, shopkeepers were on the national news saying, please don't come, because it's too much. We can't deal with it. There's too many people. And I've never known any place in this country. When you think of Times Square, New Year's Eve, New Orleans, Mardi Gras, who says don't come? Because we have too much business. That is awesome for them, but like, what? So, yeah, there's a lot of places. Like if you go to Halloween, Connecticut, it's a website, or reverse. They have all kinds of places and all kinds of cool things happening all month long for Halloween right here in Connecticut. We have our stuff on there. I'm doing a haunted walking tour in Manchester on the 25th of October. So look at this Facebook page, you'll see more about that. A lot of things happening here. Not that I don't love Salem. Salem's a really, really cool town. But like, I really respect when they say, you know what, we got enough, please. So that's got to be a lot. So yeah, so maybe look around local and then check them out, you know, afterwards, because they're still open. It's a year-round town. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna call out the names of everyone that has passed away, executed in New England on the charge of witchcraft. And like I said, they were charged with witchcraft or heresy, which is actually a Greek word that means choice. Unfortunately, they made the wrong choice. According to their church. However it was that they were deemed guilty, whether it was speaking out, whether it was living on the streets, whether it was being a single mother, whether it was, you know, having a lawsuit against the town, whether it was opening your tavern and letting people play shuffleboard on a Sunday, whether it was owing money to your church because you were expected to pay a tax to the church. There's so many different things here that it's really very sad. Oh, another thing I want to say about Giles Corey, I didn't mention, as far as our Bill of Rights go, he would have fallen under the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, which is against the law. You can't torture a person to say anything. And again, under the 5th Amendment, you have the right to remain silent, and you've seen Law and Order, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. He chose to remain silent, and then the 8th Amendment would have protected him from being crushed to death. So if you were to take a minute to look through our first 10 amendments, whether our founding fathers were looking at the witch trials or not, they didn't have to be specifically thinking about the witch trials. This is how human beings were treated in our court system on a regular basis when they wrote the first 10 amendments. Because the only law that existed until then was the law of the church. And it was brutal, and it was not fair in any way, and it was not just in any way. So our founding fathers really put a lot of thought when they wrote those 10 amendments as to how to treat human beings with some semblance of justice. So those first 10 amendments are, all 27 are crucial, because the founding fathers put the first 10 into place, and of course we had to ratify them. The rest of them, the next 17, we actually, you know, created those and voted them in by our representatives. So they're very important because those are ours. We created them, or else they wouldn't exist if we didn't want them. So now, to remember these people, oh, another train. Love the trains. Take a minute and see if we can find Alice Young and Lydia Gilbert. In memory of those that were executed in New England on the charge of witchcraft. Alice Young. Mary Johnson. Well, Alice Young, 1647. Mary Johnson, 1648. Margaret Jones, 1648. Alice Lake, 1650. Mrs. Kendall, 1650. Joan and John Carrington, 1651. Goody Bassett, 1651. Goody Knapp, 1653. Lydia Gilbert, 1654. Ann Hibbins, 1656. Mary Sanford, 1662. Rebecca and Nathaniel Greensmith, 1662. Mary Barnes, 1662. Ann Glover, 1688. And all of these in 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts. Bridget Bishop, Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Wiles, Reverend George Burroughs, Martha Carrier, John Willard, George Jacobs, John Proctor, Giles Corey, Alice Parker, Mary Parker, Eater, Wilmot Red, Margaret Scott, Samuel Wardwell, Mary Easty, Martha Corey, oh, okay, better. All right, let's put these down where Alice is. Alice, where is she? Thank you. Here we go, guys. Alice Young, witch hanging victim. May 26, 1647. There we go. Right, guys. Well, thank you guys for showing up, and thank you guys for appearing. Oh, let me see. There's a question. When I was in school in Rhode Island, was taught that the Salem witch trials. It was only a few years ago. I learned about Connecticut ones. Oh yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much. Hey, Dr. Jeremy. Thank you so much, guys, for showing up. I appreciate it. And, yeah, I appreciate you guys showing up and for being here. And feel free to share this video if you find somebody that might be interested also. So, blessings and peace. We need it. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.